The desert wakes before the sun rises, but it is never cool. Even in the first pale light of morning, heat already clings to the ground stored in stone and sand from the day before. The wind moves slowly, here heavy and dry, carrying dust instead of relief. Nothing grows tall enough to offer shade for long. Nothing stays hidden for long either. This is a landscape shaped by absence. Water disappears before it can gather. Tracks fade within minutes. Sounds are swallowed by open space. For most creatures, survival depends on staying unseen, staying still, and wasting nothing. Every step costs energy. Every breath pulls moisture from the body. In this place, weakness does not announce itself. It simply ends. As the sun climbs higher, the desert becomes hostile to movement. The ground radiates heat upward, turning the air above it unstable and sharp. Even the smallest journey across open sand can push a living body toward collapse. Muscles overheat, lungs struggle. The margin between endurance and failure narrows with every passing minute. Most predators wait for darkness here. Night offers cover. Night lowers the temperature. Night restores balance between hunter and prey. But in this desert night, no longer guarantees opportunity. The rhythms that once governed movement have begun to fracture. Prey no longer gathers where it once did. Water holes dry, forcing herds to scatter. Silence replaces abundance. Daylight once avoided at all costs becomes unavoidable. Under the sun's full glare, the desert reveals its true rule. Nothing is spared for following tradition. Survival belongs only to those able to exist under pressure that should be unbearable. Heat presses down without pause. Hunger stretches longer between chances. Mistakes are not punished by rivals, but by the environment itself. Across the open plains and rocky outcrops, faint shapes blend into the color of sand and stone. They do not move quickly. They do not chase shadows. They remain close to the ground, using stillness as protection. Every decision here is measured not in success or failure, but in survival or collapse. The desert does not care how powerful a creature once was. It does not reward strength alone. It demands restraint timing and the ability to endure conditions that should make hunting impossible. Those that remain are not the fastest or the loudest, but the ones that learned when to wait and when waiting is no longer an option. In this land, even the sun becomes a predator. They are not born for this kind of light. Across most of Africa, lions belong to the cooler margins of the day. They move when shadows are long, when temperatures fall, when prey cannot see danger until it is already close. Darkness is their oldest ally, cover for an approach, camouflage for a body built to surge forward in a short, explosive burst. But in the desert, the lion is forced into a different identity. Here, lions are not simply predators at the top of a food chain. They are large bodies, living inside a climate designed to drain large bodies first. Every kilogram of muscle demands water. Every degree of heat steals strength. The desert turns even dominance into a liability, because size alone cannot outrun dehydration. Desert-adapted lions carry the same blueprint as their savanna relatives. Broad shoulders, powerful forelimbs, jaws designed to end a struggle quickly. Yet the way that blueprint is used changes under constant heat. Movement becomes conservative. Distances are calculated. The hunt is no longer a matter of speed and drama, but of timing and restraint. In open terrain where vegetation is thin and cover is scarce, a lion cannot rely on long pursuits. It cannot afford to burn energy in a chase that ends in empty air. Instead, desert lions become architects of patience. They use the smallest advantages in the landscape, a low ridge that breaks the horizon, a cluster of rocks that throws a thin strip of shade, a shallow depression where wind is weaker and scent lingers. They travel not in grand marches, but in purposeful segments, lingering near the few places where life must pass, dry riverbeds that still guide movement, fractured valleys that funnel herds, distant water points that turn into crowded, dangerous crossroads. Because in the desert, prey does not roam evenly. It gathers around necessity. Oryx, springbok, zebra, and other desert travelers learn to stretch their own endurance to cover long distances between water and grazing. They become wary in a way that is different from the savanna, alert not just to predators, but to the cost of panic. A stampede burns energy and water. A wrong turn can lead to death hours later. In this environment, even prey is economical. That economy reshapes the lion's position in the ecosystem. A desert lion is still an apex predator, but not an untouchable one. It competes with other hunters that thrive on scarcity, hyenas that steal and pressure, jackals that scavenge every failure, vultures that appear as if summoned the moment weakness shows. And above all, it competes with the desert itself. A lion can win a fight and still lose the day. If the heat is too high, if the distance back to shade is too far, if water cannot be found before night. So the desert lion becomes a different kind of hunter, not one built around endless aggression, but one built around efficiency. A hunt must end quickly or not happen at all. A plan must be simple because complexity costs time and time costs water. When success comes, it is not celebrated with noise. It is used immediately, feeding fast, resting deeper, minimizing exposure. When failure comes, it is not just hunger that follows it, is the slow damage of heat, the silent debt that accumulates in the body. And somewhere inside that brutal arithmetic, a strange contradiction begins to form. Lions are supposed to avoid the sun. Yet in the driest regions, there are times when the sun is no longer something they can simply wait out. When the night does not deliver enough opportunity. When the rules that shape their hunting for thousands of years begin to bend. Because the desert does not ask what a predator prefers. It asks what a predator can endure. Night should have been their advantage. For generations, darkness defined when lions moved, when they closed distance, when their power mattered most. Cooler air slowed exhaustion. Limited visibility reduced risk. The desert was supposed to obey that rhythm as well, but it no longer does. In the driest regions, night brings relief but not opportunity. Temperatures fall, yet the land remains empty. Waterholes that once drew herds after sunset have dried into cracked basins. Prey no longer gathers in predictable numbers. Instead, animals arrive briefly, drink quickly, and move on before competition or danger can trap them. What remains is space, wide, silent, and uncooperative. For desert lions, this changes everything. A hunt depends on probability as much as strength. The more prey that passes through an area, the more chances a predator has to succeed. When night no longer concentrates movement, each attempt becomes a gamble. Lions may wait for hours without a single viable target crossing their path. Energy drains while nothing happens. Muscles cool, then stiffen. Hunger grows without resolution. Failure here does not announce itself with injury. It arrives quietly through repetition. Each unsuccessful night hunt leaves a deficit. Calories spent moving do not return. Water lost through breathing and exertion is not replaced. Over time, the body begins to change, subtle at first. Endurance shortens. Recovery takes longer. A predator that relies on bursts of power finds those bursts harder to summon. The desert exploits patience. Prey species adjust faster than expected. In open, arid terrain, many animals learn to move during early morning and late afternoon, when light still allows awareness and heat remains survivable. Vision becomes a defense. Distance becomes protection. Panic is replaced with controlled retreat. A chase during these hours favors the animal that can last, not the one that accelerates hardest. For lions accustomed to closing space unseen, this is a dangerous shift. Attempting long pursuits at night rarely ends well. Distances are too great. Terrain is unforgiving. A failed chase can leave a lion far from shade, far from water, and already overheated by the time the sun rises. In such conditions, retreat itself becomes risky. The predator may survive the hunt, but lose ground in a larger battle it cannot afford to fight repeatedly. Competition adds another layer of pressure. Hyenas patrol the same routes drawn by the same scarcity. They test weakened lions, harass them away from kills, or simply follow at a distance, waiting for failure. Jackals and vultures form a secondary system of surveillance, reading signs of exhaustion as clearly as blood. Any advantage a lion gains must be defended immediately, or it will be taken. And above all of this stands the environment. The desert does not punish boldly. It erodes steadily. It turns every miscalculation into a delayed consequence. A hunt that fails today may not kill a lion tonight, but it narrows the margin tomorrow. Hunger dulls reaction time. Dehydration weakens coordination. Heat transforms small mistakes into irreversible outcomes. At some point, waiting for night stops being a strategy. It becomes a liability. The traditional rules no longer guarantee survival. Darkness is still safer, but it is no longer sufficient. Opportunity shifts to the margins of daylight hours, once considered too dangerous to use. And in those hours, the desert sets its hardest challenge. To hunt when the sun is already rising means accepting a different risk entirely. Not failure against prey, but failure against heat itself. The decision does not announce itself. There is no sudden break from habit, no moment of visible defiance. It begins quietly at the edges of necessity, when waiting brings nothing and hunger sharpens faster than caution can restrain it. As the sun climbs, the desert tightens. Heat pours across the ground in visible waves. Shadows shrink and harden, becoming thin strips pressed against rock and earth. Every instinct shaped by generations warns against movement now. Muscles are meant to rest. Lungs are meant to slow. Yet this is when some lions begin to rise. Daylight hunting in the desert is not pursuit, it is calculation. A lion does not charge across open ground under the sun. It cannot afford the distance. Instead, it positions itself where movement is forced near a dry river channel, where animals funnel through beside a narrow pass between rocky outcrops, downwind of a water source that no longer replenishes, but still attracts desperation. The approach is almost invisible, measured in centimeters rather than meters. Prey moves cautiously at this hour. Vision is sharp. Awareness is constant. But heat weakens even vigilance. Bodies slow. Decision-making narrows. Animals linger longer than they should, weighing thirst against danger. In these moments, the desert creates vulnerability, not through panic, but through fatigue. The lion waits. Time stretches differently in the heat. Minutes feel heavy. Stillness becomes an active effort. The body absorbs warmth from the ground, from the air, from its own exertion in holding position. Every second spent waiting is a risk, but moving too soon is worse. A failed attempt means exposure and explosion of energy with no return. When the moment comes, it is brief. There is no long chase, no dramatic pursuit across the plain. The lion commits only when distance is minimal, when the outcome will be decided in seconds. A short burst forward, a rapid strike aimed to end resistance immediately. The goal is not dominance, it is speed of resolution. Sometimes it works. The prey collapses before panic can spread. Dust rises, then settles. The lion feeds quickly, tearing into flesh, while the sun beats down without mercy. There is no time to guard, no patience for ceremony. Eating fast is survival. Rest must follow immediately, in whatever shade can be claimed before the body overheats beyond recovery. But often it does not work. A single misstep, a moment of hesitation, and the prey escapes into open space. The lion stops at once. It does not chase. It cannot. The energy cost is already too high. Standing still, breathing hard, it absorbs the consequence of that failure in silence. Heat accumulates. Water drains away with every breath. Retreat becomes the priority, not hunger. This is where the true danger lies. A failed daytime hunt does not simply mean no food. It means time spent exposed. It means strength spent without reward. It means the body must recover under conditions that resist recovery. Shade is limited. Cooling is slow. Each failure tightens the margin for the next decision. And yet the pattern continues, because in the desert, risk does not disappear when it is avoided. It shifts. Waiting until night may be safer, but it may also mean no opportunity at all. Hunting under the sun is dangerous, but not hunting can be fatal in a different way. So the lions adjust their rhythm. They move earlier. They strike shorter. They accept that survival now depends on choosing the least lethal option, not the safest one. Daylight becomes a tool, not an enemy, but only for those precise enough to use it without overstepping its cost. In this landscape, success is not measured by how often a hunt succeeds. It is measured by how rarely a mistake becomes irreversible. The desert does not pause for new life. There is no season of mercy here, no moment when conditions soften to accommodate vulnerability. Birth arrives into heat scarcity and exposure, and the survival of the species depends on how little attention that birth attracts. For desert lions, reproduction is not timed for abundance. It is timed for endurance. Females seek the most concealed ground available. Shallow caves in rocky hills, narrow gullies carved by ancient water, dense clusters of thorn where shade lasts longer than it should. These places do not offer comfort. They offer delay. Delay from the sun. Delay from scavengers. Delay from discovery. In a land where nothing stays hidden for long, even a few extra hours can decide whether a litter survives its first week. Cubs are born into silence. They cannot follow. They cannot flee. Their bodies overheat quickly, their breathing shallow and fast. Milk provides hydration as much as nourishment, and the mother's presence becomes the only barrier between fragile life and an environment that erodes it minute by minute. Each absence is a calculated risk. Leave too long to hunt, and heat takes its toll. Return too often, and movement reveals the den. Food, when it comes, must be used efficiently. There is no excess to carry. Kills are smaller, less frequent, and often made under pressure. Feeding is rapid. Guarding is minimal. The priority is not control of territory, but speed of recovery. Strength must be preserved for the next necessary movement, the next search for water, the next moment when protection must turn into relocation. Cubs grow slowly in this environment. Energy that might be spent on play or exploration is conserved. Movement is limited. Exposure is minimized. Those that survive their earliest weeks face a second challenge, learning a world where shade dictates behavior more than hunger, and where activity must be compressed into narrow windows that shift with the season. Mortality is high. Many do not survive long enough to learn these rules. Heat claims some before predators ever notice them. Others succumb when water sources shift beyond the mother's reach. The desert does not distinguish between the inexperienced and the unlucky. It removes both without emphasis, and yet the species persists, because survival here is not built on volume, but on selection. Each generation reflects the environment's pressure. Individuals that endure are not necessarily stronger, but more efficient, more restrained, better at using the land without fighting it. Over time, the behavior of the species bends not through intention, but through repetition of what works and elimination of what does not. Raising young in the desert becomes an exercise in subtraction. Less movement, less noise, less exposure. Every unnecessary action is removed. What remains is a narrow path that allows just enough growth to continue. Even then, danger never recedes. As cubs grow and begin to follow, they are introduced to the same constraints that govern adult life. They learn quickly that pursuit is costly, that mistakes are permanent, that hunger and heat must be weighed together, not separately. The desert teaches without patience, and only those that adapt early remain long enough to pass anything on. This is how the species continues, not through abundance, but through endurance. not through expansion, but through survival compressed into the smallest possible margin. And beyond the Pieternban, beyond the hidden shelters, a larger test waits. One that does not target the young alone, but the entire structure of survival itself. The desert's greatest test does not arrive as a single event. It builds quietly, layering pressure until survival depends not on strength, but on precision. As dry seasons stretch longer, water retreats farther apart. Paths that once led reliably to relief now end in dust. Herds thin, then fragment, spreading risk across distance. What remains for predators is a landscape that no longer offers second chances. Every decision must account for what happens after the return to shade, the recovery of breath, the distance to the next refuge. For desert lions, this is the most dangerous phase. Daylight hunting has become necessary, but necessity does not make it safe. Heat rises earlier and lingers longer. The margin between effort and collapse shrinks. A hunt that begins under tolerable conditions can end in lethal exposure if it lasts minutes too long. In this environment, time is not neutral. It is an enemy that accumulates. The lions respond by reducing everything. They shorten movement windows to the narrowest possible span. They position themselves closer to unavoidable routes. They abandon attempts that show the slightest sign of extending beyond their limits. What looks like hesitation is restraint refined by survival. Speed is no longer the measure of success. Termination is. But restraint carries its own cost. Prey animals pushed by the same scarcity become more unpredictable. They change routes. They arrive at water earlier or later than expected. They pause less, drink faster, leave, before vulnerability fully sets in. For a predator, relying on timing rather than pursuit unpredictability becomes a serious threat. A perfectly chosen ambush site can remain empty for days. When opportunity finally appears, the pressure to act is immense. The lion must decide quickly, commit or conserve. A charge that fails will not be redeemed by a second attempt. There is no energy reserve to spend. There is no cooling period to recover. One misjudgment can transform a hunter into a liability within minutes. Heat amplifies every error. Muscles lose coordination sooner. Breathing becomes shallow and rapid. The body's ability to regulate itself weakens as dehydration sets in. Even standing still after exertion can be dangerous if shade is too far away. In these moments, the desert is not an arena. It is an active participant closing in without movement. Competition intensifies under these conditions. Hyenas shadow weakened lions, sensing vulnerability with remarkable accuracy. They do not need to attack. Presence alone can force a lion away from a kill it cannot afford to defend. Jackals wait for scraps that may never come. Vultures circle overhead, not because a kill has been made, but because the possibility of failure has increased. In the desert, surveillance favors scavengers. A successful hunt under these pressures is not a victory, it is relief. The kill must be ended immediately. Feeding is rushed. There is no time to assert dominance or secure territory. The priority is intake calories and moisture before heat overwhelms recovery. Any delay risks drawing competitors or pushing the body beyond its limit. Even success carries danger if mismanaged, and sometimes restraint is not enough. There are periods when prey simply does not appear within tolerable hours, when nights remain empty and days are too punishing to exploit. In these stretches, the lions are forced into a slow decline, burning reserves, losing condition, narrowing their options further. Each day without success increases the likelihood that the next attempt will be the last one possible. This is the desert's final filter, not a dramatic confrontation, not a battle of dominance, but a sustained test of decision-making under extreme constraint. The lions that endure are not those that hunt most often, but those that fail least catastrophically, those that retreat early, those that accept hunger over collapse, those that choose survival over pride. Here, evolution does not reward bravery, it rewards accuracy. Every adjustment, the timing of movement, the selection of ground, the refusal to chase, reflects pressure applied over generations. The species does not change through sudden innovation, but through the quiet removal of behaviors that no longer function. What remains is a predator reshaped by scarcity, operating at the edge of viability. And still the desert does not soften. It continues to press to strip away excess, to force every living thing toward its narrowest form. For the lions, survival has become an ongoing negotiation with limits that cannot be ignored and cannot be challenged directly. Beyond this point, there is no escalation left, only persistence. The desert looks unchanged at a distance. The same open plains, the same pale horizon, the same light pressing down without relief. But beneath that stillness, the balance has shifted. For the lions that remain, survival is no longer defined by dominance or abundance. It is defined by limits. How far the body can move before heat intervenes. How long hunger can be tolerated before risk must be taken. How precisely action must be timed to avoid collapse rather than confrontation. In this landscape, power is measured not by force, but by control. Daylight hunting does not replace the night. It narrows the gap between failure and endurance. It is not a strategy chosen freely, but one imposed by an environment that no longer supports older rhythms. The desert does not adapt to predators. Predators adapt to the desert or disappear. Over time, this pressure reshapes the species. Lions that rely on long pursuits fade from the equation. Those that burn energy without return do not last. What persists are behaviors that reduce exposure, shorter movements. Earlier retreats, restraint where instinct once pushed forward. The hunt becomes quieter, less visible, more conditional. Success is no longer dramatic. It is sufficient. The ecosystem adjusts in response. Prey learns to compress its own vulnerability. Scavengers refine their patience. Water dictates movement more than territory ever did. Each species recalibrates around scarcity, forming a system where survival is negotiated minute by minute. No role is secure. No position is permanent. The desert enforces this balance without preference. It does not favor predators for their strength or prey for their speed. It strips advantage evenly, exposing inefficiency wherever it appears. In doing so, it turns adaptation into the only currency that matters. Those unable to operate within tighter margins are removed not suddenly, but inevitably. For desert lions, existence becomes an exercise in persistence rather than conquest. They do not rule this land. They endure it. Their presence is quieter than their savanna counterparts. Their victories less visible, their failures less dramatic. But survival here demands something more difficult than power. It demands acceptance of limits. As the sun lowers and the heat finally begins to loosen its grip, movement returns cautiously to the land. Shapes emerge, then disappear again into shadow. The desert exhales, but it does not forget. Tomorrow the pressure will return. The same calculations will be made, the same risks weighed. Nothing here is resolved. Life continues not because conditions improve, but because adaptation holds just enough. In this environment, survival is not a triumph. It is a balance maintained under constant threat, where breaking the old rules is not innovation, but necessity. And the desert remains what it has always been, a place where endurance decides what is allowed to stay.